Hey peeps, Thiril here. This is my video on the BSCP certification by Portswigger that I recently passed. I prepared for a month for this exam by using the Portswigger Academy Labs and passed the exam on my first try in 3 hours out of the 4 hours allowed. Special thanks to Praetorian for providing me with the exam voucher. I have a few strong opinions about the preparation material and the exam, but I first want to start with how I prepared and a few useful tips about the exam first. I already have experience from the CTFs and OSCP certification that I did, but that was a few years ago and I have not been regularly practicing my web application security skills since long. Knowing that I wanted to start the preparation and give the exam all in 1 month, that was March of 2025. As the exam requires Burpsuite Pro version, I just used my university email to get a 30 days free license. For the preparation, starting the 1st of March, I followed a strict schedule. Every day, I would either complete or do half of one of the learning paths provided by the Portswigger Academy, depending upon the number of labs in them. I started with the easier and topics not all that useful for the exam, thus saving the important ones to do later near the exam to make sure that they remain fresh in my mind for the exam. In around 15 days, I completed these learning paths in this particular order. Starting with server-side vulnerabilities, this is the most easiest and most basic learning path that you can do, and it contains all of the basics of web application security testing. Then WebSocket vulnerabilities. These aren't all that useful for the exam, but it's a cool concept to learn about, and the Portswigger Academy and the exams use WebSockets to verify and confirm once you have dealt with a task and completed something. Then CORS, again not all that useful for the exam, but it's a good concept to learn about for the client-side exploits and stuff. Web cache deception, this is where the important stuff begins, and if you see some kind of response header indicating that a cache server is being used, then it will be a vulnerability from this path. Race conditions, not all that useful again, but it's a good concept to learn about and it might be useful for something else such as brute forcing. Then API testing, once you find out about an endpoint or via some kind of source code analysis or just some fuzzing, you can use any of these vulnerabilities in this learning path to exploit it. Authentication vulnerabilities is very useful for stage 1 and stage 2 during the exam, and this contains all kinds of bypass and business logic vulnerabilities or even session or cookies manipulation stuff, and it's a good skill to have. Then SSRF, this is very useful, so if you find some kind of URL that the server is reaching out to, you can use SSRF attacks, and there is a server usually hosted at port 6566 locally. If you find a SSRF vulnerability, there might be something there. Then prototype pollution, this is very useful because as soon as you find a JSON object in the response or a request, you can use this to maybe change some attribute or add another attribute. For example, make your own user admin using prototype pollution. Then file upload vulnerabilities, again very helpful whenever you find a file upload button. Well, 90% of the time it will be something from this learning path. Path traverser, again useful for the stage 3s because you can read files from the file system. Then NoSQL injection, maybe you can have some kind of login bypass using this or some kind of attribute modification using this. Then GraphQL API vulnerabilities, again as soon as you find some kind of endpoint that suggests that it uses GraphQL, you can use one of the extensions that I'll mention later to interrogate and introspect about the queries that can be useful in that server. CSRF vulnerabilities, now these vulnerabilities are not all that useful by themselves, but you can use them in combination with other vulnerabilities. SQL injection, this is very useful for stage 1 and stage 2 of the exam, and you can get access to a user account or enumerate the database using this vulnerability. Cross-site scripting labs from the old labs page, now they don't have a learning path for cross-site scripting yet, so you can find the labs from the old labs page. After finishing up with them, there will still be some labs that you can finish to get the ready for BSCP milestone, which is not required, but I highly recommend that you do. I completed them in 10 days along with about 10 mystery labs and both of the practice exams. The mystery labs are basically just starting up a random lab without giving away the description, so you have to figure out the vulnerability yourself, and this gives you good enumeration skills for the exam because you won't know in the exam what vulnerability is present, you have to figure it out yourself. The practice exams are structured like the actual exam but with only one web application instead of the 2 web applications present in the actual exam. For the extensions, during the preparation and the exam, I used the following extensions installed and available to use in my Burpsuite Pro. You can just search any of their names in the B App Store and you'll find them and you can install them. Although many of these I didn't even use, I just had them just in case. Along with them, I also used SQL Map and Visoserial in a Kali Linux VM. For the notes, throughout this, I took notes and saved all of my payloads same as I used them. This is super helpful as throughout the mystery labs and the exam, once you identify an exploit, chances are that you can just use your previously used payloads with some minor tweaks and it will work. I had a private GitHub repository set up for the notes, in which I used the markdown format to create different files for different learning paths with separate headings for each labs within those paths inside one file. Thus, as soon as I know what kind of vulnerability it is, I can simply open up the file name with that vulnerability and also find the lab description, which seems to match the closest with the situation in the exam. However, to be honest, during the actual exam, I did not need to use any of my notes as much because there are already great cheat sheets with pictures available on GitHub, which have the same payloads and sometimes even tweaked ones to match with the exam labs. For example, stealing a cookie instead of simply alerting in a cross-site scripting scenario. The way BSCP is designed makes these cheat sheets a lifesaver, because for the exam rules, there are only a handful of combination of vulnerabilities possible in the exam, which is how the cheat sheets are written. Thanks to them, I saved so much time during the exam. The 2 best ones I have found, I have put them in the description. The exam. The good thing about the exam is that you can begin it whenever you prefer. I didn't plan on any set date beforehand, but on 29th of March, I didn't have much to do during the evening, and I just thought to get it done with, thus starting the exam. The rules of the exam suggest that there are 2 web applications with 3 different stages or vulnerabilities each. As an attacker, our goal is to get access to a user account, then an administrator account, and finally read a file off of the file system. Furthermore, there will only be one active user on each web application, meaning one of those 3 vulnerabilities must be focused on user interaction. This can be done via the exploit server, where you can send HTML to the user, which they always view, meaning a cross-site scripting attack that can be done by serving a redirect to the vulnerable page with a working payload. The simulated user can access the exploit server as well as any of the Burp collaborator URLs, which can also be used to exfiltrate data such as the last file read requirements stage. On starting the exam, first another tab opens for the proctoring website, where you will need to upload an image of any ID such as a passport, a state ID, or a license, then activate and give access to your webcam, your microphone, and every available screen sharing for the proctoring throughout the whole 4 hours of the exam. They did not require me holding the ID, just an image upload was good enough. And after this is done, the Portsfigure exam dashboard lab will start preparing the exam component stack, just like how they do it for the practice exams as well. And after a few minutes, there will be 2 buttons for the 2 web applications showing 0 out of 3 progress on the vulnerabilities exploited. This progress is increased on 3 different events: accessing the user account profile page, accessing the admin panel page, and submitting the solution present in the secret file. There will be also a timer showing the remaining time out of 4 hours. This is how my exam went. As soon as I clicked on the first web application, the timer started. I started using the Burp's automated scanner and found the first vulnerability in around 20 minutes. I exploited it to get to the user account on the web application 1, but I was stuck after that, so I started with the web application 2. This app had a vulnerability I knew how to exploit, and it was working on my own session as well, but for some reason, using the same payload didn't work for the actual victim for like 30 minutes. But then it suddenly started working out of nowhere for the victim as well. By this time, I had figured out the exploit to get to the admin panel in WebApp 1, and getting the file read was easy too. Thus, with 2 hours left, all I needed to do was the admin panel and file read in WebApp 2. In 30 minutes or so, I had the admin access from WebApp 2, and getting the file read was simple as well. Finally, I remember visiting the exam dashboard with around 3 hours and some minutes remaining, which then redirected to a page congratulating me for completing the exam and an option to upload the project file. This was optional, but in case they suspect cheating, they will require the project file anyways. So I uploaded mine and it was over. I received an immediate email stating that my exam is under review for now, and after 4 to 5 business days, I had an email stating that I passed the certification. Now for some tips. First, I used Chrome for proctoring, Cybershaft, Notes, Cheat Sheet, and the exam dashboard, while Burp's browser for exploring the vulnerable applications themselves. Everything was on my host Windows OS, while a Kali VM was open for a few tools outside of Burp to use. Second, this certificate focuses on your knowledge about Burp Suite and automating it, not your knowledge about your web application pen testing, as the name suggests. Third, as mentioned earlier, a project file was specifically used for the duration of the exam. and it is required. So make sure you keep a habit of storing different project files during the practice for different sections or different learning paths. This will also help you setting up Burp Suite every time with a new project file, including what settings to change and look for when creating a new project file. Fourth, many of the labs from Portsfigure Academy require you to delete a file at the end. Thus, during the first practice exam, I thought I had to delete the file at the stage 3 instead of reading it, and by doing that, I made the exam impassable for me. Thankfully, as it was only a practice exam, I made sure not to repeat the same mistake for the actual exam. Fifth, even though I heard from plenty of online reviews that there will be rabbit holes in the exam, I never really saw them for myself. Sure, the exam web apps have every possible feature and functionalities such as searching, commenting, caching, login, exploit, mail server, submit solution button, etc. But if you don't find any vulnerabilities in them, there's no point in trying to find something deeper. Instead, just enumerate something else. Similarly, once you have found a vulnerability, 90% of time it will be the vulnerability you will need to exploit, as there is no fake vulnerabilities. Other 10% of time, that vulnerability might be useful later. Sixth, if you think your exploit should work and it works even on your side or your session but not for the victim, just keep trying the same for a while. Chances are it will just start working suddenly after 30 minutes or like 500 tries or something. Seventh, it will be better to find an empty room without disturbances for the whole 4 hours with no pictures or faces visible from your webcam in the background, because the proctoring is automated and it might flag them for unauthorized help. Now my gripes. Finally, after completing the whole thing, I have a few issues with the exam and the preparation provided. I am telling them so that everyone can make a more informed purchase, and I hope that this will be worked upon to improve the certification as a whole. First, the labs, including the exam labs. They are not very realistic and they look the same. This gives away the vulnerability as soon as something uncommon sticks out. For example, if you see a search bar, most of the time the vulnerability is with that. Furthermore, they should also have the freely available labs for public, but they should have more premium and useful labs for people who are logged in and if they have an exam voucher for better preparation, such as more practice labs maybe. Second, both of the practice exams are pretty much the same, and there are only 2 of them, so there is no actual practice for the exam other than the exam itself, which is why plenty of people fail on their first try. Third, when the exam ended, there was no proper sign on what to do next, such as something that says you are officially done and now you can close the proctoring tab safely without failing your exam, because the proctoring side suggests that the exam might lead to a failure when you close the tab. Fourth, there are no rabbit holes or anything different from the academy labs. All of the vulnerabilities were the same as the labs. Even the practice exams had more difficult to exploit vulnerabilities than the actual exam. Fifth, just like the labs, the exam also had issues with payloads not working for 50 times and then the same payload just starts working suddenly. I think their user board script in the backend crashes and just doesn't restart for a while for some time, leading to this issue, which is really annoying because people might think that they are in a fake vulnerability or a rabbit hole or something. They might miss the actual vulnerability just because your backend wasn't working properly. Sixth, finally, the certificate is only valid for 5 years, even though their material and exam labs haven't changed as much in the last 5 years. It also isn't that popular with many hiring staff. For the price point of $100 plus a Burp Suite Pro subscription, which can be a trial or around $500, I would expect the certificate to last for 10 years at least. Regardless, this certificate has been a journey that I enjoyed, and it led me to revise my knowledge for web application security in a fun and engaging way. Good luck to everyone who is preparing for the exam, and for people who are still confused about purchasing the certificate, I hope this video has been helpful for deciding that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys later.